proud of myself that I just remembered to do that. It's my weak spot. As you all are coming in, I'm going to share my screen because I have a slide with an intro question for you. And as you're answering the intro question in the chat, I will do a little bit of housekeeping. Let's see. Video not working. Yeah, try refreshing, popping out, popping back in. And I have been having some slightly concerning issues with my internet connectivity in the last couple of days, and the internet folks, Verizon, can't get out here right away. So just tell me in the chat if you're losing things that I'm saying. It should be okay, but just in case. All right, let's see here. Share my screen. Whoops, bear with me for a sec. People are flowing in. Oh yeah, that's not right, okay. All right. Here we go, are you seeing the intro question? So this intro question is a fun one. Whoops, don't do that now. Pause, okay, here we go. Wait, can you see it still? I think maybe you can't see it. All right, hang on, I'm gonna unshare. I had this all worked out before you came on here, and then.
I could see it, Amy.
Oh, good, okay. I wasn't sure if I paused the whole share or I just paused the screen, okay. Here we go. Here's your intro question, and this one is meant to get us having fun doing some storytelling just to start off. And make sure, this is part of the housekeeping, make sure that your chat window is open for this whole call. So you can have Zoom on full screen, you can have it minimized, but I want you to have your chat open. I actually want you to be able to see the slides as well, but it doesn't have to be on full screen. And use the chat liberally. I love when people pass notes in class and share what they're learning and what they're thinking, although I also encourage you to work on paper as we go into the kind of workshop-y portion of this. I am recording this, like I said. The recording is only going to be available for 1 week because as I was planning this 90 minutes together, I realized that I had a whole course. And in fact, even since I taught this on Tuesday, a bunch of things have changed as this course has sort of like poured out of me. So I'm gonna just have this recording up for a week and then it's gonna turn into a paid product. So you're getting a little sneak peek here. And like I said, I have you all on mute, but I will invite you to unmute at certain points when there is room for questions, which I hope we will have time for. If you're not so familiar with Zoom, I also want to point out that you can toggle between speaker view and gallery view if you want to see the whole group of us, or if you want to see, oh, stop it, you need to stay paused. This thing, okay, yes, it should be paused. Okay, so I'm just going to hop right into the agenda, tell you what's happening so you can decide which parts you want to be washing your dishes and multitasking with, and which parts you want to stop all that and turn off your notifications and just dive into the material. Let me make sure I have my chat open here. I love seeing these little stories appear. Bureaucracy and Arctic vortex. The question is on the screen, Lauren. It is, tell us where you're calling in from, but don't name the place. I come from the land of ... or the city of, the town of, and there's some beautiful little stories coming in on the chat. Okay, and if you have done this one before, excuse me, if you've been to my trainings or my workshops before and you've done this before, notice how it changes based on your mood and what's happening politically and with the weather and all that stuff. I think it's a really nice exercise to see how changeable our experience of place really is. Okay, So what we're going to do today in this 90 minutes is I'm going to introduce myself and this work very briefly. This isn't a sort of webinar format where I'm going to tell like a really long story about my rags to riches story. I'm just going to, for those of you who don't know me, tell you a little bit about who I am. And then I'm going to set us up for some juicy workshopping and share some perspectives on what I see working with hundreds of business owners over the years on all different aspects of branding and all different aspects of communicating what we do to the world, what I see as our struggles and opportunities with social media in the next year. And then for the bulk of our time together, about 40, 45 minutes, I'm going to take you through some of many questions that I use when I work with people that will start to stir the pot and get you inspired and imaginative about your social media planning for 2020. And that's the part where I recommend full focus, 100% focus, because you will definitely get out of that what you put into it. And one of the things I talk about during that section is the ways that we fragment our attention and the ways that our attention gets fragmented by some of these platforms, and how counterproductive that is to our ability to get depth in our creativity. So I'm really going to encourage you to focus on that part. And then after that workshop time together, some of you are going to want to know how you can continue doing this kind of work, how you can get more support for this work. And that's what I'm going to tell you about how I do this work in a more comprehensive way with my clients. So you can learn about that. And I have a special offer just for you, just for people who are part of this workshop, which I will talk about then. So that is the plan. And I'm ready to get started. Are you guys ready to get started? I'm looking, oh, hey, Bernice. Hey, Sherry. Thanks for coming, everybody. This is fun. I don't know if you can tell. Well, you probably can't tell now that the slides are on. I have acupuncture needles all over my head right now because I'm fighting something, and you'll hear my voice going like in and out a little bit. Okay, so a little bit about me. I help small business owners with my business, which is called the Bureau of Tactical Imagination. I'm in about my 5th year. I help you master the art of visual storytelling and learn the tools of cultural workers. And that's my background, visual art, cultural work, and activism, so that you can spread ideas and tools that matter in the services of your body of work that you're creating, your bank account and your business revenue, your communities. You know, there's a lot of beneficiaries of this work that you do. And in service of the more just and imaginative world that you are helping to bring into being with your work. That's why I am here. So I have this background in the art world and cultural work and arts activism, and that makes me a huge nerd about visual culture, a huge nerd about creative processes and how they work. And all of these are a part of what I think of as the skills of creative directors. And one thing that makes me different than a lot of other people in the industry is that I think creative directorship is a set of inherent human skills that we all have. It's not necessarily something we need to silo off and hire people, other people to do. Although sometimes that can make strategic sense, we get to have that visionary hat on and that deeply creative, imaginative hat on in our businesses, and we already do in a lot of ways. And in many ways, we need more support to do that, and places where we might need to fill in our skill sets around that. But this is a really important set of capacities for business owners, including understanding how the larger visual culture works and how our work makes cultural change. And all of our work does, in some way, contribute to the larger culture. So, and I want us to use all these powerful tools for good, because the tools of cultural influence are being used for good and they're being used for bad in the world, as we know. The people who tend to be attracted to my work and come work with me are using them for good, and it's really exciting to see what happens. So let's dive into the work that we are here to do together. As you have questions, you can put them in the chat. If it seems like I didn't see the question, go ahead and ask it again, because it's likely that I'll miss some. But the question I want you to answer now is, what is my vision? Here we go. What is my vision? Not that. Here we go. For my social media presence this year. And I realize I'm throwing you into the deep end with this question. How do I want to feel about engaging in social media this year? What do I want it to do for my business? What do I want it to do for my heart and mind? What are the good effects I want it to have on the world around me? So follow your mind wherever it goes around this bigger piece of this question. What's my vision for my social media presence this year? I'm deliberately scooting you around all of the feelings that you may have, both good and bad, about social media, and just getting you to go for what you want. And I'd love to hear this one in the chat. I think seeing each other's visions is going to be a really great way to start this time together. Hillary says, I want to feel brave and proud. I love that. I want it to feel like my love languages of space, ease, and simplicity. Beautiful. Clear and consistent. Authentic magic mix of personal and professional. Infusing the professional with my personal stories and bringing all of my great professional work into my personal contacts. I just want to go for it and not be afraid. Hi, Susan. Purposeful. Attract people who share my values and my cynical side-eye of wellness, in quotes. This is great. I'm going to borrow some of your visions, everybody. I want to be exciting and helpful. Keep going. I want to hear more. Wow, we got 39 people in here. This is great. Convey value at every turn. I want to feel like the snow that wakes Dorothy up in the field of poppies in The Wizard of Oz. Beautiful. I want people to feel included, part of a community, proud of their background. I want it to be a spell, a powerful, effective potion to help people remember what they came here to do. This is great. I love you all. This is great. Okay. So everyone take a beautiful, deep breath into this and let yourself just want all of this. I'm part of a global team, says Lauren, so it's a bit hard to answer for all of us. Yeah, I would encourage you to just, what do you want for your team? What do you want it to mean for your business as a whole? Are you a creative director in your team, Lauren? I hope you're all reading these because it's really beautiful. I was going to start today by talking about the potential for what social media could mean for our lives and our business, but I decided to have you talk about it. And that's what you're doing. So it's really good to read these. Okay, Lauren. So I think, I guess what I'll talk about for a moment is what's my vision for us when it comes to social media. I'll just add this in here. And I think a lot of it's being said in a lot of different ways. But when I sat down this morning to just kind of like do my own visioning, here's what I came up with. I want you to be the wholehearted, inspired, confident, creative director of your work. That means you communicate your work in inventive, original, authentic, beautiful ways that grow you to create, ways that nourish others to receive. I want social media to be fun for you. I want it to help you reach your goals in your business. And I want you to take exquisite care of yourself and your own creative development. I want the body of work that you're bringing to this world to be strong and resilient and evolving all the time. And I want your energies to be protected as the creator of this work. I want your social media to be integrated with all the other parts of your life and your business in a way that feels balanced, healthy, empowering, inspiring, and pleasurable. And I want it to give back to you in big ways. So all of that and all of this that you are writing in the chat is entirely possible. Entirely possible. I'm glad I met you too, Susan. Yes, social media can be fun. It is, in fact, fun. So I also now want to transition into recognizing that we have some pretty big struggles around social media and some small struggles around social media. Many of us, most of us, to some degree, have some kind of struggle around it. And there are really good reasons for that. Like, it's a really complex thing, social media, culturally. The way it operates in our lives, in our society, in our culture is incredibly, it influences our society and culture in all kinds of really powerful ways. It influences our bodies and our minds in all kinds of powerful ways, really great ways and really tough ways. Yes, I struggle with it. So I'm just going to run through some of the ways I notice many people getting stuck. And you can just yell here in the chat when we get to one that speaks to you. And you're welcome to put your own in there too. One way we get stuck around social media is we're ambivalent about it. So, you know, social media, on the kind of evil and terrible side of social media, we're aware that we are being very much manipulated by some very big powers that be, who are jockeying for our attention and jockeying for the ability to transfix our gaze in their direction as consumers. They are jockeying for the ability to confuse us and give us misinformation, to influence our elections, for example, for those of us in the United States and probably many other places in the world. There's a lot to be suspicious of and mad about and scared of, right? Because many of these companies are hiring, they're all hiring specialists who understand the physiology and the neurology of what shuts off our brain and gets us to keep scrolling, okay? And we know that this is damaging to us, our sense of presence, like on a very basic level, our sense of discipline around the ways that we want to use our minds and the ways that we want to communicate. And there's such a preponderance of like cynical narratives about what it means to be human. I could go on, but there's stuff on the bad side. And then on the other side, we have opportunities as people who are spreading ideas and bringing services and tools that matter to the world, people with good agendas. We have opportunities to find our communities and find our people and be visible and make a difference in much cheaper and easier and creative ways than we ever have been able to before through social media. You know, our reach can be so much broader. And for many of us, it's opened up all kinds of opportunities we couldn't have imagined. And it's allowed us to be cultural producers in ways that are cheaper and easier than ever. So we can make a full-length feature film on a smartphone. And that's a real challenge to the old gatekeepers, right? That's why they're jockeying so hard to, you know, undermine our creativity. They're threatened. So yes, Lauren, you live in a conservative rural area. Social media connects you with like-minded people. So yes, we're ambivalent. We have a real push-pull, like hot and cold, off and on kind of relationship with social media, many of us. And for good reasons. But the problem is ambivalence is a real creativity killer. It's a real dampener of our initiative, right? So I'm not going to talk a lot more about the rest of the obstacles we face, because I'm going to actually weave them into the perspectives and offerings that I have that come next. So we're ambivalent about it. Let's see. Many of us feel that it cheapens our work. Our work that we're doing in the world often has so much depth and nuance. For many of us, it's the work of our hearts, you know, and we have so much experience behind it, and we don't want to dumb it down. We don't want to make it soundbite-ish. That's something I hear from people a lot. Do you have that one? Tell me in the chat. I'm curious. Yes, especially visual art. Yes. Yeah, I think a side note to this one is making something digital that's meant to be physical or that's meant to be in person can feel like something is lost, right? Another one, we have addictive tendencies that derail us. So we either stay away way more than we should, or we get addicted and sucked in, and suddenly a half an hour has gone by, and then we've lost our momentum and our motivation, and it actually interferes with our day. I'll stick my finger up for that one. This happens to me when I'm not being really disciplined about it. I roll all the time. I can really feel how it degrades my ability to focus with a strong attention span on my work. So, and you know, we all have different relationships to our neurobiology, and we're neurodiverse, and you know, it affects all of us in different ways, but that very engineered sort of like continuous dopamine hit that we get is something that's been installed kind of in the whole population at this point if we're on social media. I really don't mean to sound so dystopian, but it kind of is. Might as well talk about it. I really question how I can increase my production and creativity while decreasing my intake through social media. Yes, that's one of our topics for today. Another struggle is we feel like we don't have time. It feels like if I were to like really go for it and make a really beautiful social media content strategy and put all that content out there, it feels totally overwhelming. I'm going to spend all my time doing stuff for social media and no time doing my own work. I'm curious who has that one. I hear that one a lot. Joshua says, it's really easy to take a break with Facebook and then decide that arguing with racists is more interesting than trying to write sales copy. Good point. That's exactly it. It interferes with our choices about being present and deciding where to put our attention. Yes. Okay. I love the comments. This is a big one. Sometimes people don't admit this one, but almost everybody has this one. I even have this one, and like, this is my work as being an artist. We worry about if we have enough good ideas on the fly. We feel like we might lack a certain skill set we need. For example, I'm not visual, or I take too long with writing, etc. There's a lot of related ones here. Like, when I get really, really visible, am I actually going to be interesting enough? Am I really willing to go all in on this thing I'm doing? Is it important? Will anyone care? The creative confidence abyss can open up in a bunch of different ways around this. And we've all been hurt to some degree around our creativity and our imaginations growing up in this society. And it really comes up around social media. Like, it really feels overwhelming to many of us to feel that invitation to be fresh, creative, and imaginative day in and day out on behalf of the work that's important to us and that we want to share. It's a big one. Phew. Deep breath, everybody. I'm stirring up the pot. A lot of pressure to come up with new things daily, and will it really matter? Exactly. And there is a lot of training that you get out there that says quantity is more important than quality. And it's about, you know, being consistent every single day and hustle, 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 hustle. And all of that is really damaging to the creative process. So my main goal I'll probably say that phrase 20 times. I have a lot of main goals. One of my main goals in being with you today and in doing this work with all of my clients is that you get to really ground yourself in creative processes that allow you to develop your work and develop cultural material that grows out of your work and share that with the world. And that's going to look really different in terms of format and frequency, etc., for each of you. There is no formula. It can be useful sometimes to push yourself to be, frequent to a certain degree, to push yourself through the creative confidence abyss and get you back to the table. But choosing fluff over something that's actually meaningful to you for the sake of productivity is not what we're going for. That's not going to help build your brand. It's not going to help do the work that you want to do in the world, and it's going to deplete you. All right. So this is where we get stuck. What do I have next in the slides here? Oh, one more. We feel like we have to wait to hire someone to do it all for us because we just throw our hands up in the air and we say, I can't do any of this. It's too hard. I'm not doing a good job. I feel bad about myself, et cetera, et cetera. And I just say, when we have an approach to doing social media that feels really aligned with who we are, what matters most about our work, the change that we're making in the world, where we already have confidence and where we already have abilities with our creativity, where our growing edge is, our social media is going to start working for us. It's going to start working for your business. It's going to start doing what you want it to do. And then you're going to be into it. You're going to have time for it. You're going to want to have even if you hire people to do certain pieces, it's not because you don't want to deal with it. You're like right in the center of it as the creative director of your business. Okay. So I'm going to dive in asking you all a bunch of questions, and I'm going to give you a little meta information about why I ask questions in the way that I do. Oh, good, Sarah. I'm glad that lands. Thank you all for being so engaged in the chat. It really helps me be connected to you while I'm doing this. And it does influence what I say and what I do. So stay engaged to the extent that that's useful to you. So when I ask you these questions today, I am dipping into the well of design thinking, which is a very overused phrase that means all kinds of things. And there's a lot of different models of design thinking that are all sort of related, and they all have their differences. In the work that I do in the flagship program of my business, which is the Visionary Syndicate, which is a comprehensive brand building program, I have rethought design thinking, customize it specifically for small business owners in the digital space, in the online space. Small business owners who do a lot of their marketing or service delivery or product delivery online, because our needs are specific and the tools of design thinking are really powerful in terms of building really anything, a life, a business, a brand, a marketing strategy, really useful. And I have broken it down and simplified it into 3 sections. So my bigger training program has these 3 sections as the kind of skeleton. The first is, and it just describes a simple creative process that you can bring into everything you do. Today here we bring it into thinking about our social media plan. And the first piece is listen. And this is where we do research and gather raw materials. So this is where we make sure that when we sit down to create something, we have piles of possibilities. We have endless combinations of interesting things to work with. We've researched and explored our voice, our vision, our values, the people that we're seeking to reach. We've researched the culture around us, the markets and industries and movements that we're in. We've really listened to who we are as creators and communicators. We gather all that material in the listening phase, and we don't try to push it towards a result, right? We just throw everything into the primordial soup, right? The ideate phase is where we start pulling things out of those piles and combining them. So I use this collage metaphor a lot because it describes a way of creating your way towards solutions that are going to be much more lively and present and engaging than those kind of solutions that you try to like see in advance and then march your way towards. So there's all kinds of tools and methods in the ideation stage for generating brilliant ideas, generating brilliant materials out of that raw stuff from the listening phase. And then communicate is, what does it take to then publish? What happens when this goes live and interacts with other people? How do you release these things into the world in a way that makes sense and is appropriate and in the most inspired sense for your business? And these three things, I picture them in sort of a Mobius strip with ideate in the beginning. You listen, you research, you come up with ideas and proposals and take risks. You put it out into the world, you learn from it, and you go back into listening from what you learned. You ideate, you communicate. And I have to say, this process feels really different than many of the other kinds of processes we engage in our businesses. I don't think it has to be, but we have a lot of data-driven and results-oriented processes in our businesses where we have to think about the outcome first and reverse engineer our way back. This is different. And what we're doing today, this is process-based, not product-based. And I think this part of our business has to be the part that's about your creative development as the director of the vision and the imagination, the creative director of your business. Okay, no questions in the chat. Pop questions in if anything I'm saying doesn't make sense or I'm moving too fast. There we go. So let's get started into the listening phase. And that's most of what we're going to do for the next 40 minutes is listen with these questions that I'm going to ask you. And then I'm going to move you into ideating and see what kind of brainstorm comes out of this process. And that's really all we're going to have time for today. Now, I've made a workbook that I need to update because I added new things into this workshop this morning. And the workshop has even more questions than we're going to get to today. I ran out of time on Tuesday, so I'm going to have to be like crisp, which is not my forte. I am a wordy woman. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is we're going to start off being visual by drawing your social media asterism. Now, I intentionally put a really awkward kind of crappy drawing of my own up here so you'd know that this is not a time to be beautiful. This is a time to just play and think out loud. This does not have to be a logical map. I just started putting in the main platforms where I operate: Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. I envision them as stars. I put some planets around them. So my business page on Facebook is a planet, and my group on Facebook is a planet, and my Instagram stories and my main feed are planets of Instagram. And I did an orbit around the outside of places where I have stagnant accounts. Twitter, LinkedIn, and TikTok are my stagnant accounts. And then Medium might be floating its way somewhere towards the middle, but I'm not sure. So get your social media presence, where you show up and what you're doing out there, on paper, both the active things and the non-active things. Just draw it out for yourself. Blogging, that does fit into the asterism. So you'd make that as another star. MailChimp blogging is basically sending an email out, Susan. So email marketing is a little different than social media marketing, but I would go ahead and put it in your asterism. That's a great question. Newsletters and emails. It is content marketing, so go ahead and put it in your asterism. Didn't even think of that, but it is another place where you create words, images, ideas, and you put them out into the world. Schwinn, the question was, what about email newsletters, MailChimp, etc.? So yeah, you can put that out here too. Megan's asking, is this the present state or the dream state? Right now it's the present state. And it's really just the places you show up. So later you can remember the different places and think about them. Right, Susan. Your email is something you own, and social media is not something you own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of toggle in these slides between offering you some perspectives and asking questions from the perspectives. And these, I think, start to address some of those struggles that we have as well. If you write for an online print magazine, should you put that in, Michelle? Sure. And good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. Yeah, put anything you want in here. If it feels like a place where you show up and you're visible in the world and other people see it through social media, through email, put it in. You'll find that my answer is almost always yes to your questions. All right, so diving in. Social media is a place to develop work that grows you, your brand, and the quality of your work. So our first question has to do with the body of work that you do, like what you actually are building and presenting to the world. And this is that deep well of your genius, your expertise, your experience, your love, your caring, the things that drive you, the topic, you know, the content of the work you do, how you deliver it to people. So the question is, this year, what is the most important learning edge in the work I deliver? Right now, we're not thinking about social media. I want to know where you want to get better, where you want to get smarter, deeper. Where do you want to find more mastery in your craft? Where do you want more depth of understanding in your work? So there are places where our work can be kind of on autopilot because we're so good at it and other people need it and we can just go do it. That's what I'm not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about right now is, what's the place where you are being grown by this work in the next year? Go ahead and write about that for a minute or two. I'll even set my little timer because I never know what time I have. All right. And there are more questions about what should be in those asterisms. When in doubt, yes. What I have in mind is just what I have. And once you write your first thought in relation to this question, go a little deeper and go to your next thought. So what does that mean? You know, what does that mean next? And this question, it's less about your business development, less about the skills you need around business. It's really more like, what is the thing? Are you a body worker? Are you a novelist? Are you someone who teaches courses around money? What is it in that work that is the next learning edge for you as a practitioner? That's what this question is about. Claudia asks, such as more professional training? Yes, what would it be in? That's one way that could go. How do you want to grow in the work that you do? What's exciting to you? What's inspiring to you? That's another way to ask it. All right, I'm going to keep us moving. A lot of these questions, you're going to just start to let thoughts emerge, and you're going to jot down the first things that come, and I'm going to want you to come back to these later after our call, okay? Just so I can give you as much as I can give you right now. In the workbook, there are additional questions here that have to do with getting you connected to how your learning edge benefits the people who follow you when you make it visible. Okay, the next statement I have for you, truthism that I have for you, as someone who has visibility around a business or a product or a project on social media, you are a cultural worker. So in other words, you are in the work of changing the culture around you for the better. And this is something I need to remind myself of, and I think a lot of us do. We're so trained to be consumers of so much stuff that's coming at us. And even if our work feels sort of neutral in terms of the culture around it, it never is, right? So we're surrounded by these kind of common stories and mythologies and ways of relating, ways of thinking, ways of talking, being together, you know, in the subcultures and cultures that we move in online. And when we put anything out there, we are contributing to it, celebrating it, upholding it, or we're disrupting it, or we're proposing other ways of being. We're always creating a ripple, always, always. Even completely conforming to it, that reinforces it. So we always create ripples, right? So, oh, big long comments, good. I'm gonna read all these afterwards. So the next question is a beginning of how we start to take stock of that and add this knowledge into our pile of inspiration. So I want you to make another asterism, another drawing. And I decided to put this in just before this call, so I don't have a drawing to show you. It could look like a Venn diagram. Some people get something out of doing it that way. So in this one, I want you to map out the industries that your work overlaps with, the markets that your work overlaps with, however you define that is fine, the subcultures you may be connected to or working within, the larger cultural conversations that your work is relevant to, the movements that your work is connected to. This can look a lot of different ways, but this way of mapping is kind of like starting to see your position, both in that traditional brand positioning sense and also your position in the culture. Your brand is its own little microculture within these larger cultures, and that affects them and is affected by them. So, and you may find yourself, you know, over the long term, like one of the industries my work overlaps with in the long term is design, but, you know, there at different times, the issue of cultural appropriation becomes a big conversation in the cultural milieu of my Facebook feed, right? And then suddenly my work is really overlapping with that because of cultural appropriation in the design world. And that might be a conversation that I engage in. And that's a conversation I've nurtured around my work over time. So it can be one-time things, it can be long-term things, and you could really geek out and go far with this map. But for right now, simple as can be, 3 or 4 or 5 things off the bat that you can think of. Yep, it can be like a mind map, Susan. Amy, you can make lists with arrows as well. Making shapes is not more important than lists. Lists are fine. However you want to do this is fine. This is your creative process, people. When you get your thing mapped out, just say a word in the chat. I want to make sure some critical mass of you has got this part done. Be quick and dirty. Don't draw a lot of like fancy doodles. Shell is asking, what do I mean by subcultures, conversations, and movements? Well, for example, in my work, subcultures that I overlap with would be what would be a subculture I overlap with? Well, I notice a lot of people come to my work from the kind of maker communities and the like DIY maker communities. Not a lot, but you know, that's a presence in my world. So subcultures can have to do with your ideal clients or your collaborators. Conversations and movements. So, you know, in my work, I think my work has a relevance to movement conversations, or larger cultural conversations about the role of business owners in making social change and cultural change, and the kind of skills that are required to do that, or to be aware about that. So there are big conversations out there about ethical business and ethical marketing. And this, you won't get all of this right now. Potential audiences, Susan, that works. This is something you're gonna have to think about for a while. You know, every time I think about this, I come up with some new ideas. So this is just a taste. And now I'm gonna jump into the next question, which is related. And for now, I want you to just pick one thing on your map that you just made, just one thing there. And start to ask yourself, just open up the question for yourself. What are the dominant stories that you see and hear in those spaces? What are ways of thinking and doing and relating that are common there? It's okay if you're blank at first, because like we're so saturated in these things, it's hard to like stand back and see them as like these culturally specific little worlds. But see what comes to mind. And once you've got one, I want you to write, how does your work kind of live in that space? Is the role of your work there to dismantle or disrupt those kind of stories or those trends or those ways of being? Is it to heal and regenerate and be a generative or healing presence? Do you propose and suggest alternatives? Do you celebrate the ways that things are done and felt in those spaces? Do you uplift? And it might not just be one answer. There might be a few different roles that you have. But just put a little attention on that. What's your relationship to those kind of stories and trends and ways of being that you find in those spaces? Olivia's is to shift the focus. Renee is to dismantle, disrupt, and heal and uplift. focusing on inspirational and effective examples instead of negativity. And these kinds of words and phrases that you're generating right now, when you start designing creative processes for your social media and coming up with ideas, these words can really help give you direction. How do I know what the dominant stories are? Go research. Go be kind of an anthropologist. What do you notice people saying a lot? What do you notice, what are people's advice about? What assumptions are people making in a specific space or subculture or market? What are the visual trends? Like, who says that anything having to do with yoga has to have like women lying down on the beach looking serene? Like things like that, like things that we just sort of take for granted. Or who says that images about small business always have to have a latte in them, right? When you think about all the other things that could be being spoken. This is all part of listening, yes. Joshua. All of this is part of listening and researching. Yep, research it, Claudia, wherever you hang out. Instagram, Facebook groups, Pinterest boards, YouTube channels, like any place people hang out and talk to each other, any place people are selling and promoting work, any place people are trying to change culture. My Facebook feed is full of people like engaged in really challenging and really interesting deep conversations about what to do about some of the big wicked problems of our time. And it's a really interesting place to see where we are in terms of what we think is important to think about and talk about. You know, what we assume about different kinds of people and what people think. Why are there so many life coaches sitting in the middle of the street in lotus position? Asked Renee. Why are so many coaches in front of a beach house and rented sports cars they can't actually afford? These are great questions. These are really great questions. All right. I know I am doing this at breakneck speed, but I'm going to keep moving and just trust that each of these things is something that you will take away and that you get to work on more and just keep turning around in your mind. All of these questions are generative and they will make you have new thoughts each time you ask them to yourself. So these are like sort of practices in themselves, these questions. So here's another little truism for you, according to me, the great Amy Walsh. You are already a powerful creator, and the ways you already communicate best are the place to start and a bridge to what you want to learn. So our next question is going to be about what creative processes should you engage in? You know, it sort of starts to get us listening to you about what makes sense there. And there are already ways that you do and have always communicated and created in the world and with the world in ways that are most natural and fun for you. And sometimes thinking about it in the present moment can feel complex, so it can be interesting to think about the whole span of your life. And if you've always been a person who was most comfortable with physical movement and maybe physical comedy around the people that you know and love, are you the jester? Are you the clown in your environments? When you were a child, like, were you the kid who always organized people to do like little theater acts and dance routines on the front porch? Or were you a child who liked to dive really deep into the world of like video games and puzzles? Are you kind of like a very gamification, analytical kind of math brain creator? Are you someone who has just been reading your entire life and you're deep in the worlds of science fiction and magical realism? Like, what are you made of as a cultural being and as a creative being? And with this question, try not to get sucked into ideas about what constitutes real creativity or real art. This can be about sports, it can be about fixing cars, it can be about cooking. What do your hands and mind want to do? That's our next question. What are the methods of creating that Sorry about that, folks. I lost my internet connection for a moment, but I came back. Can you hear me? Those of you with your videos, okay, good, I see thumbs up. Sorry about that. I did come back though. Is she talking? Shwen says. Okay, so I'm just gonna dive right back into the question and trust that whatever you missed me saying wasn't that important anyway. It's the questions that I really want you focusing on. So, what are the methods of creating that offer ease and creative flow for me? And when you've had a moment on that, go into what are the ways of creating that attract me or might challenge me? What do you want to try? What are you excited to work on? This one can also include like things you've seen other people doing on social media that just really light you up and that entice you. It's just something you'd love to take on and figure out. Okay, I'm gonna move on to our next little bit of truthiness, as Stephen Colbert would say. We can commit wholeheartedly to being social media creators and marketers and leave behind feelings of defensiveness and fear. So this is a challenge to myself too. I've been working on this with myself a lot lately. Those places where we have judgment, where we have disdain, where we feel superior, or where we feel exhausted by social media, or we feel self-protective and we feel alarmed and scared in the face of the very real and damaging things social media can do. I think it's possible. Oh my God, all of these things, Leanne says. I think it's possible for us to actually inventory what that stuff is and really take charge of it. Like we get to make really concrete decisions about our habits and our practices on behalf of our own creative development, on behalf of our goals. And we get to set up practices and habits that help us resist the parts that deplete our creative juices, right? So our next question has to do with that. Our next question, oh, this is a little bit of a different question. Okay, I'm gonna go back to this for a minute and set up the next question. So that's one piece of it. Another piece of it is that we have different kinds of feelings and different kinds of things that come up about each of the different platforms. So many of us will say, Facebook is too busy and it's exhausting, and then there's Mark Zuckerberg and blah, and there's too many ads, right? But Instagram feels more fun and more intuitive and more visual, and I love that. And someone else might say, well, Instagram is too overwhelming because it's so hard for me to come up with all those images, and I like this other place, etc. So I want you to take a few minutes now. You can grab your initial asterism, which is the places you hang out, and take one of them, like one of the main places you hang out. What do you assume is true about that platform and its possibilities? And how might you use a platform differently than you've seen it used elsewhere in service of your idea in particular? We're getting a little bit brainstormy now. And I'll also say it's not required that you do something differently. Like, you may have seen someone else do something that makes a lot of sense for your business. Someone's particular use of one of the tools of social media, if translated and applied to your work, might be really fruitful. I'm not talking about like stealing someone's content, but we're all always influencing each other's ideas about how to use the platforms, right? So pick one of these spaces and just think about what you think is possible there, and then imagine what might be possible beyond that. Let's hack these platforms a little bit. Steal like an artist, exactly, Judy. It's a different kind of stealing than outright thievery, appropriation, information, what's that called? Intellectual property theft. An example, Mishi? Well, one example is everybody says that on Instagram is all about the images, and you should have really short status updates, words. But why couldn't you do long form Instagram things, right? Or what does your Instagram story have to be like, have lots of words in it and stickers and things like that? Like, what if you did an Instagram story that was just like one long image, right? If you think Facebook is too busy and overwhelming, how could you create sanctuary there? Hillary says, feels like Instagram's supposed to be pretty, and actually what I want is to show the not pretty, the real, the vulnerable. That's great. You're onto it. So that your answer to this question can be about content, or it can be about format, whatever comes up. Okay. Pretty soon we're going to be done with the questions, and I'm just going to ask you to put in the chat at that point, what are the insights, what are the ideas that are bubbling up that you didn't expect from this call? But we're almost done. We have one more, I think it's just one more question here. This next question is related. What practices and choices will protect and inspire my imaginative capacities as a creator in 2020? What's going to support you to be a creative director in relation to social media? And a related question here is, what are the practices or the habits that will keep me more intentional and powerful as a consumer of social media this year? How can you be intentional about what you take in? And how can you be intentional about protecting your creative energies? What does that mean to protect your creative energies? What is your creative process? What do your creative processes need from you as the creative director? Amy, you asked a great question. I will talk about that. Actually, I'm going to talk about Amy's question now. I'll read it because I think it's related to this question. So, ooh, I just knocked an acupuncture needle out of my head. Amy says, I'm stuck on a realization. I think I've been hanging out on social media and posting ideas like they were lemonade I was selling. So I guess I can't think of a way to sell the lemonade of my ideas on social media in a way that doesn't feel like begging. I'm trying to imagine people that I admire. So one thought, like one perspective I want to throw out there is that a social media post, like one gesture, one movement that you make on social media that is not the product that you're making, right? It's one word in a much longer song or poem. And this is how social media is different than many of the other bodies of work we create, where we can sort of put our hands around it. It's like we can move towards a final product, like a book or a course or something like that. Social media is more of this ongoing body of work that creates a kind of culture. You create a world around your work. And this is very much what a brand is, in my opinion. It's a world, it's a culture you create. When people enter it, they feel the vision and the values sort of infused in the space. They feel your voice there, or the voice of your team, right? So Amy, what if you think about a social media feed, an Instagram feed, a YouTube feed, not so much as a place to kind of keep showing up and being like, I think this, come buy my thing. Think about it as an exhibition space where you present a body of work over time. Or, think about it as, some other kind of cultural space where things are always happening, things are growing, things are developing, and you get to come in and engage in it. Sometimes your posts are about, pointing people to a call to action. Actually, you want a lot of calls to action. Sometimes it's about selling something directly. But a lot of the time, it's a place people come and they are aware that they are in the presence of a body of work that is developing. This is your performance space. This is your exhibition space. This is your place. Think of it like as an installation you're creating for people to enter. I think that perspective can help us. A curated Instagram feed is a work of art in itself. No one image is supposed to do all that work. It's those images together that create a work of art. And using the word art can feel overwhelming to some of us, but that's what we're doing. We're using words and images to evoke feelings and to stimulate ideas and to create culture. So you are an art maker. And you get to ask yourself, what's the art project that moves my body of work forward for me, that nourishes me as a creator, that draws people into the culture I'm building? What can that look like? Okay. Finally, there's always enough time to create when the process does what I just described, when it furthers your work, nourishes your learning, and brings good results for you. So I think when you have creative processes that are very alive and very fruitful for your business, there's going to be enough time. You're going to be able to see that every time you put time into it, you get something back. Sometimes that's revenue. Sometimes it's new ahas for you about the work that you do that you can then bring to your clients or to your processes. There's always something you're getting out of it. You're the creative director, you're in charge of it. So now we're going to take a brief dip into what it means to generate a creative prompt, a starting point. So for each of your social media places, you're going to come up with, not right now, but eventually, you're going to come up with a number of possible starting points that get you creating your way towards and creating your way into this world that you're creating. And there's a lot of different ways to do it, but mostly it's just about brainstorming and thinking about combining different elements of what has come up for you today in our call. So, for example, you could pull an idea from the kind of creative processes you want to do more of. You could pull an idea from the area of growth in your work that you're interested in. You could pull an idea from thinking about a platform that you want to mess with, and see what happens when you start to combine these things. So I've stirred a lot up today, and now I just want to have an open brainstorm. And if this slide and this method feels like, what is she talking about? Ignore it, just brainstorm. I would love for you all to write on your paper, write in the chat, ideas and possibilities that are bubbling up now for you as a result of the inquiring that you've been doing on this call. And I'm going to give that about 3 or 4 minutes. And then we're going to move on. And I can't wait to see what you're cooking up. Remember, it's a brainstorm, so you can have lots and lots of ideas that you'll never do and lots of ideas that you think are bad ideas. That's a really fun and really important part of brainstorming, so go for it. As you come up with some ideas, put them in the chat because I'd love to get to respond to them and see what's coming up for you. And if you're stuck or you have questions, put those in the chat too. I love what you're all putting in the chat. Such good questions, such good ideas. Jennifer, I love that you said being focused on sharing, connecting rather than a perfect result. That goes back to what's the culture you're creating. You know, social media is made to be a place where lives and work are in progress. And, you know, it's really important to be able to show people that you have the experience you have the mind that you have. You don't want to act like this is just casual and unimportant. But ideas about sort of professionalism, like having the perfectly curated feed where everything's exactly the same, that actually leaves out the opportunity to create a culture where things are alive and they're evolving and they're moving. So, you know, if you look at my Instagram feed, it feels like a world where there's all this creativity happening, but I'm changing my mind all the time about how I want to use colors and how I want to use icons. A lot of our ideas about branding, I think, can keep us much more limited than we need to be and keep us from using social media in a really present, really lively way to really connect with people, which is what social media is for, right? This is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay. So thank you all for putting all of this in the chat. There are a lot of really good questions coming up that I'm not going to actually be able to respond to in detail right now. Sarah's asking, you know, as a painter, wonderful painter, you know, what it means to build a culture and story around that. You know, the paintings themselves are the visual culture that you make. But there's more I could say about that. There's another question in here that's really good. How do I curate my exhibition spaces? There's some what next kind of questions coming up. And I want to just put a little note here. My YouTube channel, basically what I use my YouTube channel for, which is called Tactical Imagination, is to do Q&A videos. I collect questions from all different kinds of people and I answer them in videos. So I'm going to be harvesting from this what I can use in my Q&A videos, and I will ask your permission and then answer your question on YouTube. So do keep putting questions in. If you want it to be answered in that kind of setting, do keep putting your questions in. All right, so thank you, thank you, thank you. You have really just had, like I mentioned, just a taste of part of this model of listening and researching and then bringing it into ideation space and all the things that can happen there. I think you probably all have, okay, you know, I have these ideas, I have these insights, you know, I have these possibilities, what next? Each idea brings up another set of questions. And another thing I'm thinking about is how can you be supported to remember these kinds of perspective shifts and paradigm shifts that I've given you today to support your social media making throughout the year. When so many of those struggles and barriers that we bump up against are so habitual and kind of come in under the radar of our awareness even throughout the year. So at this point, I'd like to shift and talk about the Visionary Syndicate. The Visionary Syndicate, I basically built it to be a support system for this way of making and this way of creating businesses. And I made some slides about it. Let's see. Here I am levitating, which is not something I promise will happen to you if you join the Visionary Syndicate, but you never know. It could happen. It happened that day in my studio. So the Visionary Syndicate, in short, it's a comprehensive method or a comprehensive tool. Come on, slides. Don't break on me now. Here we go. It's a comprehensive training in creative directorship for your business. So when you are a part of the Visionary Syndicate, you get the opportunity to build an evolving, culture-changing brand. And you got a taste of kind of how I think about that and frame that in this workshop. And it gives you both the kind of perspective shifts and the concrete skills of design thinking that you need to do that. And when I say brand, I'm not talking about just your website or your logo. I'm talking about all the ways that your work is delivered to and becomes visible in the world and invites the world back into it. A big, reciprocity-filled imagination, brilliance delivery machine that is your business. All right. Hi, everybody, I'm back. Gotta love that moment when you start talking about your programs and your internet connection dies. Such good timing. All right, let me get my chat back open here. Thank you. Thanks for hanging in with me, folks. All right, I'm gonna share my screen again. Okay. So in the Visionary Syndicate, you get this comprehensive training. There's a training program called Build Your Visionary Brand. You get live monthly in-person support and teaching from your fellow members of the syndicate for an entire year. And you build what I call a visionary brand flight manual, which is kind of like a brand style guide, but it goes beyond that. And it's about, it's a document, kind of a manual that supports your creative process and your creative directorship for years to come. So that's where you also record your ongoing insights about your market, about the cultural change you're trying to make, etc. And I thought the best way to introduce you to the syndicate is to show it to you, because I built it all in this last year. But first I want to tell you a little bit about why I built it. I built it because I've seen so many brilliant people with beautiful specific visions farm pieces of their creative directorship out to create cookie cutter branding or to create branding that's not necessarily taking advantage of the full opportunity of sharing the voice and vision of the maker, right? Or people neglect their branding and their social media communication and their creative directorship altogether because of the struggles that we've talked about, right? I want people to have more support. Like, I could see that there's a gap in the small business world where there's an assumption that some people know how to do this and some people don't. And that's just wrong. I know that the skills of cultural production. Okay, I'm just gonna keep rolling. So these are inherent skills that all human beings have. We communicate in words and images and sound, comedy, emotion, while connected to other humans. That's just human, right? Whoops. And when business owners have creative confidence, which is a big topic in the Visionary Syndicate, it's sort of the foundation of the entire design thinking process. When we have creative confidence, and when we have some simple tools that artists use to create original work and get great new ideas, business owners are unstoppable. We can make really incredible things happen for our businesses. So I'm going to tell you how to join, but first I want to show you the syndicate. So tell me if you can see this. Yes, this should be working. This is the Visionary Syndicate. It's in Mighty Networks, so thank goodness it is off of Facebook. I actually love Facebook groups for various reasons, but I'm really happy about this happening in Mighty Networks, which is a deep interest network. It's only Visionary Syndicate members who are in here, sharing our work, talking about what we're doing, supporting each other. It is connected to Build Your Visionary Brand training, which is a self-guided training, which, as you can see, brings you through the listen, the ideate, and the communicate phases of brand building. There are also tutorials around a number of branding projects and questions. And you'll see in the ideation phase, we talk about combinatory creative practices. We talk about naming and framing and finding metaphors and mapping ideas. We talk about the nitty-gritty design elements of your brand. There are many lessons on logos and colors and typography, all within this larger understanding of a brand as a culture. We talk about how to make prototypes, how to try out ideas. So that's one example of just one place within. And here's an example of the Visionary Brand Flight Manual, which obviously you fill in your own images, you fill in your own fonts, you fill in your own copy. This is the template that everybody gets. And this gives you a sense of the kind of content that we work through in the Visionary Syndicate. So you're getting deep behind the scenes action here about vision, about voice, about values, about mission, who we serve, how we communicate with our clients, the ecosystems that we're in. We started doing that today, mapping our cultural position. And we move into the prompts that we're using and the creative methods we're using and our sources of inspiration. So you really get help with every part of what it means to be a creative director and communicator to the world on behalf of your work. So the people who are in the syndicate now are the founding members, and they're all having epiphany after epiphany and making big changes to their brands, finding more engagement with their people. Let's get back to our slides here. And I would love for you to come join. So what's happening right now is that I am opening enrollment for our January cohort. So this is a cohort of people who will start January 1st and go all year long with the Visionary Syndicate. When you're in the syndicate, you get a lot of connection with me. So I host 2 group coaching calls a month live on Zoom like this. And I host a live class every month in response to what I see happening in the group. So you get 3 opportunities. They're all drop-in, but you get 3 opportunities to come, share what you're working on from the training, share how it's going with your branding, and get support. And the training program is giving you really deep branding education. So I would love for you to come be a part of it. I'm really excited about this cohort. There's a special bonus today if you sign on to the Visionary Syndicate after this call, sometime between now and the 1st of January, and join this January cohort. You'll also get a 1-hour one-on-one with me. And one of the things we could do is go through all the material. I just realized it's a little after 1:30, so I'm going to wrap it up now. We're going to go through all the material that we did today, and we're going to strategize and think about your marketing plan for the year in that hour. Or we could work on whatever top of mind, of the moment business challenge would most move you forward to get a hand with right now. So this is comic at this point. My goodness. Okay. Thank you all. Those of you who are still here, I really appreciate it. Here's the information you can go to sign up. This is what you do. You go to amywalsh.net/Visionary Syndicate. It gives you the installment plans that are available there. You can sign up now. If you do it right now, and we're still here together, I will put on a wig and dance for you. But it's 1:33, and I want to value your time and your attention. So I'll send you a little video of me dancing with a wig on. Seriously. Okay, I'm adding that as a bonus. If you sign up between now and January 1st, you get a video of me dancing with a wig on. Partially because that's one of my favorite things to do for people anyway. And partially because I appreciate you and I want you in here. Thank you, Olivia. You can't get too upset about the tech things, you know. So I will hang on here and answer any questions that you have about the syndicate. I rushed through a little bit because I went a little long with the other stuff, as I always do, because I get geeked out and excited about it. If you need to go now because it's been our 90 minutes and you have a life, go ahead, and thank you for being with me today. It was really lovely to be here with all of you and to be with the incredible, thoughtful participation in the chat. How many people do I anticipate participating? There are 15 people in there now. My goal over the next several years is to have hundreds in there. How many people are going to sign up for January 1st? I don't know. I can't really answer that question. I would love to bring in another 10. And then there'll be 25 people in there. At any given moment, about half the people are really actively, engagingly working on something. So usually the calls and the live events that we have between 5 and 10 people each. So we really get personal, like we really have time to hang out together. Olivia's a part of it. I don't know if there's anything you want to say about it. You're a great model of how to do this stuff. Thank you, Olivia. I take that as a great compliment for someone who helps people with public speaking. Leanne, yes, as a creative director, doing your own work is harder for you than it is for your clients. Sophia, your first experience with me. Well, thank you. Thanks for coming. Wonderful. Olivia says the Visionary Syndicate's been extremely helpful in shifting her thinking around branding. So go sign up. If you have questions, there's also a link on that page where you can sign up for a call with me and you can ask me all your questions one-on-one. Thank you so much, everyone. It was great to be with you. Lots to chew on, yes. Yes, we have a lot of decontaminating to do from conventional ways of doing things, Olivia. All right, I think we're done unless we have more questions or you want to see anything else from behind the scenes of the Visionary Syndicate. Thanks, everyone. You're welcome to unmute and say goodbye with your voice if you would like to, if that would be fun for you. I always love hearing a couple of voices on the way out the door.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Have a wonderful week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
You're welcome, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.